Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Breath of Life Conversations. I am just looking so fabulous right now. If you don't watch this on YouTube, don't worry, you're not missing anything. I felt compelled to record this episode, and granted, yes, an episode needs to come out this week. An episode needed to come out this week. And usually I try to do it when I'm feeling like energetically in this space where I could like feel compelled to I don't know, put makeup on and stuff like that and like care about what I'm wearing and all that stuff. Well, today I felt compelled to record and I didn't actually also feel compelled to uh get dressed. So if you're a person who watches this on YouTube, this is what you get. This is the no makeup version, the t-shirt wearing, yoga pants wearing uh individual that is me. So today what I wanted to talk about was like medical intuition. I know that I probably should have put this as like my very first episode, but what can I say? I wanted to like jump in full bore in this podcast of like s- just getting conversations out that could be thought provoking and that you could bring to the dining room table sort of thing. It is like one of my like biggest dreams to come up to somebody and have them be like, "Oh my gosh." So I listened to your podcast and I immediately brought it to my person, my family, my whatever, and I said, "I was listening and Abigail said this." That is like one of my like if somebody does that to me, guys, I am going to be like, I made it. It's not even gonna matter like what I'm doing. Like I'm gonna have known I made it. So, this episode may be coming a little bit late in the minds of some people, but you know what? Better late than never, I guess. So here we go. What is medical intuition? How do I use it? Why is it important to me? Why is it that I even like call myself that? And I think that's where I want to start. Why do I call myself a medical intuitive when there's a lot of other healers out there that would say that they're just healers, that they're just energy workers, whatnot. And to me, the definition of a medical intuitive, depending on who you ask, can change based on who you're asking. Seriously, I think that's one of the problems with it in this industry is like in the intuitive space, you have people who could call themselves a medical intuitive based off of the definition that like anybody who happens to be an intuitive who deals with health issues could be called a medical intuitive. This, in my opinion, is completely inaccurate, and it's probably a good thing that there are not more individuals utilizing the term medical intuitive because, based off of my definition, they would not qualify. A medical intuitive is somebody who has medical background and also has intuitive understanding and practices and heals utilizing both. So there's actually very few individuals in the intuitive space who started off as intuitives who actually qualify, and in my opinion, just my opinion, who actually qualify to be able to utilize that term, that label. And so I would say the general population is doing themselves they're following what I would say. If you are a person who like decided to go into intuitive health and wellness and wanted to become a healer and you did become a healer because you used to work in tech, for example, and but then struggled your for I don't even know how many years, n amount of years, and with gut health, let's say, and you decided that you had gone the modern medical route, it didn't work for you, then you went into the intuitive realm, the alternative health and wellness realm, it worked for you, you figured it out, you healed yourself, and now you feel compelled to go out into the world and help people heal from their gut issues. This to me is not a medical intuitive. This is somebody who has had a lived experience. That lived experience, depending on how they ended up going through that lived experience may have gleaned them a lot of knowledge from a medical perspective, but because they do not hold a degree in some form of medicine, nursing, doctor, DO, PA, NP, RT, like because you don't have that qualification, you are not a medical intuitive. You're just simply an intuitive healer and energy worker. So I would say if you've been wondering, well, why is there not more medical intuitives out in the world or people who are saying that that's what they are? That would be why, because they probably have a similar definition to me, where if they don't have that medical background, then they can't possibly call themselves a medical intuitive. Now, I also want to bring up that there's other ways besides like the modern medical route that I would also qualify somebody as being a medical intuitive. Somebody who practices shamanism, who is trained with a shaman, and shamans obviously being worldwide. The word shaman actually comes from like Serbia and like Mongolia and not actually from like indigenous culture. Um, but also individuals who practice traditional Chinese medicine, for example, traditional Hindu herbology and medicines, like anybody who has actually practiced the art of diagnosis inside of the body and maybe utilizes any form of any form of medicinal practice, therefore utilizing herbs and tinctures and decoctions and all that stuff, and like understands how to like make that, understands how to dose it out, that would also qualify as being a medical intuitive. But I can also see how people would say, like, it's just a lot easier to just call myself a healer and not have to worry about the semantics of it all. And I get that too. But I would say what irritates me the most about the industry is that there's no standardization. There's no set of qualifications that qualify somebody to become a healer. And so what ends up happening, what I've actually had clients say to me is that they've gone to people to seek healing. They've felt like they were good people, that they were powerful in what they did, and then they had a horrible experience because the individual was only, the individual thought that they were running clean energy. The individual thought that they were connecting very well. They thought that they had the right foundation of knowledge, but they didn't. And the person that was going to them ended up getting hurt more than helped. And so when they finally got to me, they said, Abigail, it took me so long for me to come and have a session with you, because not because of anything that you have said or done, but because I had such a bad experience with others who also claimed to be healers, medical intuitives, whatever. And for me, that just speaks volumes to, because we don't have any standardization, we don't have any like set of qualifications, we don't have any trainings that you're supposed to go through. You can just one day wake up and say, I'm going to be a healer, and you can just say, I'm charging X, Y, or Z for this healing. It it does nothing. It does nothing for, professionalizing the world. And I think for me, when it comes to just being a healer, and this might be a little bit of a digression, because it's not specifically in reference to medical intuition, it's just in reference to healing in general. It's a pain point of mine. It's a pain point because people are getting hurt more than helped by people who just one day woke up and said, "Yep, I'm gonna be a healer. This is what I feel like I'm supposed to do." But they've had no training. They've worked with no one. All they have is their own experience, and they're gonna sit here and say that they're clean and clear enough energetically to pull health information and give accurate assessment of somebody. It's kind of bollocks, in my opinion. So, medical intuition for me really means that you've got some level of expertise, and that expertise can be quantified, and it is quantifiable in more than just one's lived experience. It takes a lot for me to listen to somebody's story where they have no medical background at all. They've got no traditional training at all. And and hear their story and hear what they've done. It takes a lot for me to say, yep, okay, I'm checking you off. Like I'm basically saying like, yep, you meet you meet this my level of standards. And anybody who knows me knows that I have high standards. So also something else that you should know about me, if I am recommending somebody in like the health and wellness space, outside of myself, you best believe, like, I know that they have put in the work, the time, and if I am giving them my like stamp of approval, that means something because my standards for like somebody who is a healer, much less a medical intuitive, is very, very high. So that kind of brings me to like, how do I use medical intuition? How do I use my intuitive knowledge and abilities as well as my medical knowledge? And truly, it is this bridging. It's this beautiful bridging. I like to tell people I'm not the healer that needed to be healed in order to heal you. And really, that comes from the fact that I've only ever been sick in my life twice, and I've been injured, I think, 3 or 4 times. And that is it. That's the extent of the stuff that I've had to deal with. When I first started really understanding the language of what I am as an intuitive, and then I started breaking down how I wanted to teach people and really looking at my anatomy and saying, why is it that I've been able to have such a really wonderful life experience of not getting sick pretty much at all? Like the fact that in 36 years, I've only had two illnesses that put me down and out. And I was 2 or 3 when I got pneumonia, and I was 21, 22 when I got the motherfucker of a virus from hell. And um, like that took me out. um, the fact that that's all that I have to claim as like what I needed to be healed from, I was looking at it and going, okay, what about me is different? I really like set it up as an experiment in my mind. And I then started to compare myself with others who have not gotten sick or who don't get sick, looking at centenarians and looking at the blue zones. And I really started looking and doing the math essentially, and looking at our life factors. And then I started looking at my genetics, and I started putting together all of these bits and pieces of things that I did growing up that was just intuitive to me, things that I just did because I knew I needed to, and looked at how I processed stress and how I processed my food and what foods I ate and how I did how I moved my body and all of these different things, and I pieced them all together and then came up with this very very specific methodology for how I maintain a really healthy body. And from there, then looked at things that I knew was inside of my family line and things that I knew that I struggled with on and off. So, for example, when I really had this methodology down and I said I could heal from anything, like anything at all, I want to have a body that is so optimally functioning that it's ridiculous, like very much a miracle body. I decided I was not going to deal with allergies anymore, which was something that came on and off throughout my life. There were periods of time when it was worse than others, and times when I barely even noticed it. But I knew that there was a sensitivity to the changing of the seasons, particularly in relation to the pollen in the air. And so I got rid of my any allergies. Haven't had to take a Zyrtec or a Claritin once in almost 6 years. And or no, and longer than that, in 6 years, almost 7. And I went and I said, you know what? I have been told by doctors in the past that I could become pre-diabetic. There was one particular provider when I went to an endocrine specialist um, that said that I, really was at a high prevalence of being in this diabetic realm, and that came from family history. I said absolutely not. I'm getting rid of that. Not even going to need to worry about that. And in fact, I'm going to do myself one better. I'm going to make sure that diabetes is not something that exists inside of my bloodline at all. I ended up healing not only myself but my mom, and I healed my bloodline moving forward. So anybody tied to my bloodline no longer has to worry about things like that. There was also stuff around breast cancer, MS that I also went through and like looked at my contracts and looked at the contracts and dealt with all of that stuff as well. So things that I wasn't even currently struggling with, I went and said, these are never going to be a problem for me, and they're never going to be a problem for my bloodline moving forward. So I bring these up as an examples because number one, they're not something that I had to heal myself from, apart from the allergies. But all of the like family history stuff, that was not something that I had as a diagnosis. But I said, this is going to be something that I'm just never going to have to worry about. And having the background that I had with medicine, I knew what to look for inside of my body and I knew what to look for in the bloodline. I also spent a lot of time downloading why chronic illnesses happen, downloading why acute illnesses happened, looked at the difference between a contracted illness versus an energetic frequency match, looking at how belief systems power how physical things can happen inside of the body. And so, with all of that information and knowledge, it just helped me to excel my cellular abilities and my energetic abilities and my frequency to such a state that at this point, I can truly and honestly say that I'm not a person who gets sick. I'm not somebody who deals with significant health issues, have never been, in fact. And so I'm not having to wade through and dig through the issues of, well, this is what happened to me. So I'm just going to have that as something that could possibly be projected. Now, I want to say that there's a lot of healers out there that have done a lot of work to become very clear vessels so that whatever they have gone through, they're not having that as the necessarily the foundations of what it is that they're looking at when they look at you and when they're pulling your energy forward. They're working very hard not to see their own situation and then basically give you information or paths forward that are not going to work for you but would have worked for them. I do recognize that, and I honor the fact that there are some healers out there who have worked very, very hard to be the cleanest vessel possible. But what I also want to say is that at the end of the day, we're still human. And when you go to a specialist, you go to a specialist not because that specialist has necessarily had that thing. You go to that specialist because they have a wide range of knowledge and they have a depth of knowledge that helps to encompass and give them a really wide perspective. And so I remind people of that when they start to work with me, of that this is a benefit of working with me, is not that you're sitting here going, oh, well, Abigail has had her own experience with it. That's not why you're coming to me. Why you're coming to me is because I have a breadth and a depth of knowledge that excels and it far exceeds what somebody who only has their lived experience can speak to. And I have physical practice, right? I still work at bedside as an emergency room nurse, which keeps me up to date on not just emergencies, but on a variety of different things. You can't be an emergency room nurse and only understand emergencies, because I will guarantee you that about 95% of what comes into an emergency room isn't actually an emergency. And it's also not an urgent matter. More often than not, in our society right now, people are going into the emergency room for primary care. because they can't get into their primary care physician. So we're dealing with like chronic illnesses, we're dealing with pain, we're dealing with just acute illnesses that should be dealt with in clinic but are not being because they can't get in. And so having this everyday working knowledge puts me in such a pivotal and like unique position, and I absolutely love it. I love it. It gives me something that other healers cannot attest to. The other thing about me and what I work so hard to attain is the like ridiculously high energetic frequency in which I hold. I was just telling a student of mine that my energetic aura goes out about 20 feet in every direction, 360 degrees at baseline, which is a good 14 feet greater than the average individual, because that is how that's where I've gotten it to expand to. I'm continuously looking at how much further can I expand and be able to hold it and maintain it without getting tired. This is a skill I have practiced and perfected. Now, what does this mean? This means that everybody who comes within 20 feet of me gets the benefit of my energy, gets the benefit of my elevated frequency. And so, yes, it's why I can walk into a room and the energy can flip on a dime. It's why I can walk into a room and people take sigh a breath of relief because they're like, "Oh, Abigail's here." Like the number of times that I have heard that when like shit's been going crazy and I walk into a room and everything immediately calms down is absolutely a testament to the level of frequency in which I hold. And it's a practice thing at this point. It's not something that I have to like turn on and off. It's just always on, and that's just where we be. But it's also why somebody can come into session with me and they're like, I'm not worried anymore. Like I know that I've stepped into a space where I'm going to be taken care of and I'm going to get the answers that I want and that I need, more importantly. And Abigail's not going to bullshit around. Like, we're just going to get straight to it. And that is not something that happens with every healer. There are a lot of healers out there that have to sit and they work very hard to get their energy to where it is so that they're not being infected by somebody else's energy and being pulled down and having to, adjust to all of the different things that can happen from, fractured souls and fractured energy to entities to the chronic or acute conditions that are happening in their bodies and be having to worry about picking up stuff because somebody's emotions are eating away at their energy. There's so many different things, guys, that I just don't have to worry about at this point because I've far exceeded that in my ascension journey and as a healer who has practiced these things and made them a priority in my life. So for me, it comes down to being a healer, but particularly being a medical intuitive, really means that I'm doing all of the work. I'm doing the energetic work to make sure that my energy is where it needs to be and my frequency is where it needs to be. And understanding that I have the tools in my toolbox, that I'm actually utilizing the highest form of energetic technology in order to heal people, but also I'm not skimping on learning the most up-to-date modern or Eastern medicine, both. Like, I still read all of the medical papers. I still look at the journals. I still look at what's coming out as far as medicines go. I'm still looking at what's happening in our world and how the environmental factors are changing our human DNA. I'm still doing all of that work because if I don't do that work, I may not be able to pull the most accurate information out there. What I tell my students when they're just starting whether they're just trying to increase their intuitive abilities for themselves, or whether they are looking to actually utilize those abilities in a more professional aspect, is I tell them, you need to read, you need to experience, you need to watch as much as you possibly can. Why? Because the more language you have in your vault, the easier it is for your guides to communicate to you what is out there. And so it's not about trying to go out and like figure out, being the like discoverer all the time. Sometimes it's about figuring out what others have already found and piece it together and create a much fuller picture. Now, are there some times when I'm like, I've never seen this before, and I'm gonna have to be the one to describe what this is and create the name for it? Yeah, of course. Yes, that's what being on the fringe, that's what it means to be a leader in the industry, is that there are going to be some times when I have to name something because it's the first time I'm ever seeing it. But what I always remind myself is that things are always changing and there really isn't anything new under the sun. Like sometimes we like to think that there is. So I'm always open. I'm willing to name something and then I'm willing to rename it when I realize somebody else has been doing something and I just hadn't come across it yet. So that for me is a big, big thing, is that there's always, as a medical intuitive, there's always continuing education. There is always an opportunity to expand yourself. There's always an opportunity to challenge yourself. And by doing those things, it makes you a better healer. It makes me better for my clients as they come in because they deserve that. They deserve me to be they deserve for me to be at my best so that they can get the most out of the session. They get the most out of the healing. Their healings last instead of being this thing that, like it's good for a couple of days and then it goes away. So let's see, where else do I want to go with this conversation in relation to healings? I guess I should tell you guys like what working with a medical intuitive is like, because I feel like after all of that information, you're probably like, well, what's the difference between you and like every other healer out there? And I would say that in many ways it's gonna be or feel the same. Okay. So I want to just like straight up, I'm not gonna lie to you about that. When you're trained as an intuitive, there's a certain way in which you're trained to access somebody's energy. What's different when you work with me is the level to which I can describe what I'm seeing. So, and the level at which I can go down and look at something. So I can look at something going down to the atomic level, to like the atomic quantum level, because I know what those things look like. Those things have been studied, those things have been addressed, those things have been named. And so, being that I've seen what that looks like, being that I know what a red blood cell looks like versus a T cell versus a Treg versus a lymphocyte B cell, right? Like, if I'm looking at those things inside of your body, I know exactly what it is that I'm looking at because I've looked at them underneath microscopes. I've looked at those things in books and stuff. I don't have to sit and wonder what it is that I'm looking at. Whereas a different healer might be able to go down to the level of the cell, but they may not be able to tell the difference between an mRNA and a tRNA. They may not be able to tell the difference between a lysosome and a T cell. They may not be able to know the difference between an antigen and an antibody, right? But I do. They may not be able to tell the difference between an amoeba and a virus, but I do, right? So this is the difference between somebody who can only claim that they're a healer versus somebody who can say that they're a medical intuitive in my world, right? Based off of the definition of what a medical intuitive is. And so I also then have, with all of that ability, I also have all of the knowledge that an intuitive has. So I know about soul retrievals. I know about having to work with the inner child. I know about shadow work. I know about the chakras. Probably know more about the chakras than than others do, because I also have gone and worked with people who are mapping out higher dimensionalities than just 1 through 7, because their dimensionalities only exist from root to crown, right? I'm going and excelling far beyond that. So what I'm able to then bring to the table is not just working within your personal chakras, right? The main 7, but going all the way from the center of the earth up to your higher self at 13, being able to integrate in lessons and understandings from your Akashic records at the 12th chakra, or the 12th dimension, right? But also being able to say, I can view your bloodline. I can see where your star lineage started. I can track that. I can look at what different elements are playing from a time aspect and an emotional aspect that's leading towards different past lives, and how those are being integrated in your physical current incarnation. Um, I'm able to do things like past, future, former, um, self regressions, being able to interact with your higher self and deal with soul erosion. There's a whole realm of energetic knowledge, shamanic practices that I have been trained in. Also being able to recognize things like theta healing and be able to utilize them, being able to understand the meridians, being able to understand the various channels in the body and how it interacts with the bioelectromagnetic field of the earth, right? All of this stuff exists inside of this lovely container that equates to, in this lifetime, as Abigail. Not everybody has this level of intuitive knowledge. Not everybody is practicing this level of intuitive knowledge. There are individuals who their only ability intuitively to gain access to your energy is being able to use a deck of cards, or only being able to access you through your human design, or only being able to access you through your natal chart, or only being able to access you through your numerology. And while some may see this as a really like nice, compact way in which they can view a human, what I have noticed is that healers who are really worth their salt are not just accepting one one tool, one way of access. They push themselves to be able to access more. They push themselves to be able to hold a higher frequency that allows for them to heal in a much more complete and a much more full way. And I know that as I say that, complete and full seem like the same word, but as I'm feeling into this, they do have very different connotations. They do have very different meanings. And I'm hoping, my hope is that you're feeling that as I'm saying that. So that's what it is. That's what it's like to work with me and to sit down in my energy and to have that knowledge coming from me. That's pretty much what I really want to like say about that, I guess, about medical intuition. And I mean, I could have really gone into things that like could really pet peeve me, but I think I landed on like the biggest one, which is that like this industry really has not standardized healing and has just said, you know what, well, it's okay. Not everybody needs to have the same standards. But as a person who has standards, as a person who believes in standards and like honors standards, I fully just get very peeved about that, about the fact that just anybody can wake up and say, "Yep, this is who I am." And it with no practice, with no qualifications, with no certifications, with nothing. And I just, guys, I've just seen how hurt people can be, like both in the intuitive space and in the modern medical realm. Like I have watched people come in a physical state of an utter mess, like just an utter mess. And I listened to their story and asked them the question, like, what brought you here in this state? And the things that they say about what people who claimed to be healers told them to do, that goes directly in the face of everything that we know to be true. And don't get me wrong, as a scientist, I fully understand that it can be incredibly difficult. It can be very challenging to have to live in a world where science is discovering something new all the time. It can also be uh, incredibly difficult to be in a space where you know that your body is just so much slightly different, that everything that works for 99% of the population is not going to work for you. And then to have to try to weed out the people who are just trying to sell you snake oil. God, I completely understand how frustrating it can be and how long it can take for somebody to find a healer that is actually worth it. I also know that I'm not the only worthwhile healer out there. I'm gonna go on record with saying, like, I know a fair amount of healers who are actually worth their salt, who have put in the time, who have put in the work, who are continuing to do that, who are continuing to advance themselves. I am not the only one. So it's not like there's no one else out there. But what I would just caution people is kind of like a final thing with this is like, please use your discernment. Use your discernment. Ask questions. Don't sit back on your laurels. Don't get lazy. Like, ask questions, guys. Ask questions. And also, just be really happy that you're here with me. Be really happy that you found me. Be really happy that you're in my space and I'm here for you because I am one of the best. I might not be the only one, but I am one of the best. And my track record like proves that. It's why I've been able to help people with their fertility, getting over chronic illnesses, stabilizing chronic illnesses, allowing for themselves to get to a place where their body stops getting sick, like in total, and not just for them, but for their family. Teaching people how to have an energy where it not just benefits them, but it benefits their entire family. I love it when my clients come to me and they're like, Abigail, after working with you for X amount of weeks or X amount of months, I've noticed that I'm no longer getting sick, but are my children. Neither is my husband. Neither is my partner. That to me, like, is just so bloody brilliant. I love it so much. And it just if you could see me right now, like I don't even really have words to describe how happy that makes me feel that people get to come to me and they get to tell me that their whole life and their whole family's life has drastically improved because of what I'm teaching them, because of what I've helped them to achieve. And that's incredible. It's incredible to be able to say like a person has been able to stabilize out their insulin in their body and they have been able to essentially say that they are no longer a diabetic. For people to say I've had to be on bowel medications for my entire life, and after 12 weeks of working with you, my body has now remembered how to function the way nature intended. That is like, that blows my mind. It blows my mind every single day. And the fact that I get to say that to people, that I get to say that people who have struggled with their fertility and gone through rounds of IVF and who have gone through like just years of trying and not being able to come to me, have a meeting with me, and then within a couple of months has gotten pregnant. That to me gives me so much joy. It gives me so much joy. And I know that it's not an accident. I know that these people aren't finding me accidentally, that this was just some fluke. This has now happened with hundreds of clients at this point. And so I know that while there's always room for failure. Well, there's always room for, things to not go my way and not go my client's way. Of course that is. Of course, for a lot of my clients, and one thing that I will say is like with those clients that I just mentioned, they're not working with me for just one session. Yes, miracles can absolutely happen. Yes, I have had it where in one session I have been able to heal chronic pain. Yes, in one session I have been able to identify the physical reason for why something is occurring in somebody's body and set them on the path that has made it so that that is no longer an issue. Yes, miracles have happened 100%. But what I will also say is those clients with the largest, the biggest, most impactful transformations don't just work with me one time. They don't work with me just one time. They work with me for at minimum 6 months. At minimum. That's just that's just the way that it is. And that's the way that it is because that's how the human body functions. If you've had something happening with you for years, then you shouldn't expect that in one hour session, I'm going to be reversing years worth of trauma and energetic nonsense is the best way that I can describe that. But you can expect that within, 12 to 18 weeks, we're going to be able to undo years worth of damage, years worth of maltreatment. That I think is 100% doable. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen. I've watched as clients have said, I'm on 30 different medications and I'm tired of this. I can't do this anymore. My body is breaking down. And now, 18 weeks later, 20 weeks later, there we are, and they're off every medication. They're off every medication and they're not taking supplements. And that is one of the best feelings. It's one of the best feelings to watch as somebody says, my life has completely and utterly changed. I didn't have hope before, and I have more than hope now. Now I have a life that is thriving, that I'm living and not just surviving in. It's incredible. So, guys, I hope that this was informative. I hope that it gave you a deeper understanding and appreciation for people with my level of expertise. And I really hope that it gave you some things to kind of watch out for when you're looking for a healer, when you're looking for an intuitive to help you on your journey. Also know that like if you're looking to work with me, if you've listened to this and you're now like, God damn it, I need you in my life. I have spots open for one-on-one clients. I have different packages for 6, 9, and 12 months. So please feel free to DM me, message me, email me. Um, and we'll talk about what is going to be the most beneficial for you. And yeah, guys, this is actually, I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed this conversation because I love talking about what I do and I love talking about the results that I get and I love talking about what peeves me in relation to the industry. So this is kind of like a win-win-win-win-win for me. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you next time on the next Breath of Life Conversations. Bye, y'all.